Welcome to Currents Up Close. Today we're talking about Cedar Falls Public Art Committee and the art around and in Cedar Falls. And today we have as panelists that are going to tell us all about that information. We have
I'm Tom Stancliffe. I'm a professor of art at University of Northern Iowa. I'm a sculptor. I've done a lot of public art projects, and I've served on the Public Art Committee since time began.
I'm Dan Perry, and I'm the studio technician and instructor at University of Northern Iowa, and I'm the vice chair of the Public Art Committee, and I'm also a sculptor.
And I'm Martin Arthur. I'm the City of Cedar Falls Cultural Program Supervisor, and I run the Hearst Center for the Arts.
great. This is going to be fun today, too. All the years that we've worked on projects that are around town that other people have really enjoyed and we've enjoyed putting there. So we're going to talk a little bit today about just how this all happened, how this all Public Art Committee happened, and why it's so important to a community to have a good Public Art Committee. Tom, you want to start us off by telling us about how we began and how we've glided into the community?
Sure, Barbara. It started, the Public Art Committee, before it was actually formally the Public Art Committee, was an ad hoc committee made up of community volunteers, and we put together for maybe 3 years or so an annual outdoor sculpture exhibition that stretched from the Hearst Center down through Main Street. And it was a really good vehicle. And every year there was maybe 10 or so artworks that were placed along the street. They were from artists from the region. Some of them were students from UNI. And it did two things. It gave these artists in our communities and in our region a voice. It gave them a place to put work, to be able to express themselves and contribute to the vibrancy of their community. At the same time, for those of us who have been around the area for a while, downtown Cedar Falls was still in a rebuilding phase. You know, it was struggling. And so it became a way to draw attention to downtown. It brought something new into downtown. A reason for people to go down and look at the streets, kind of get a fresh look at those 4 or 5 blocks, you know, and have not only an aesthetic experience, but a kind of a contextual experience where they would sort of revisit that part of Cedar Falls. From there, it became, over the course of years, and our first sort of formal project was the Gateway to the Trail sculpture in Peter Melendi Park. That was our first sort of official launch of what is now more formally known as the Public Art Committee.
And who was the sculptor for that, Tom?
It's Bruce White, who's from the Chicago area, very well known. He's done commissioned work, you know, all around the region, all around the country, actually. And he was our first commissioned artist, and we had asked him to sort of interpret. We were busy at that time developing the trail system, and to create a sculpture that might somehow reflect that, the idea of the river and the trails and so forth. And so the sculpture you see there carries that.
Yeah. And part of that money for that sculpture came from the fact that we had RAGBRAI came through Cedar Falls.
Right. As well as a generous donation from Jim and Cecilia Mudd to kind of get that started. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really important piece for downtown Cedar Falls because of the floodway project and the Army Corps of Engineers putting that dike through there, and it just sits there and just overlooks the whole thing. Plus, it helped develop that area.
It did. You know, when you do a public art project, it's different than other kinds of things. I mean, it's certainly different than a flood wall, you know, and it serves to kind of become this landmark. It becomes this kind of waypoint for people, that it's this thing that's something else. It's not infrastructure, you know. It's this thing that's there for their enjoyment, you know, and it becomes in some ways bigger than life after it's there for a while. It becomes a part of the fabric of the community, and that's really important.
Yeah. It is, and bringing artwork downtown was a project that really was time changing.
Yes.
As you say, it really set Cedar Falls off. And,
it did.
And when the city did the landscape or the streetscape,
Yeah, that became a part of it. So when we had once that sculpture was in place, then I think the planning, and you might correct my time schedule here a little bit, but the redevelopment of the streetscape along Main Street, the planners recognized right away the value of the public art that was there, that we had placed, and created spaces all in that design to place works. So at that point, then we thought about whether to continue with temporary exhibits or to start to commission permanent pieces to fill those locations. And we kind of did a little bit of both for a while. We sort of borrowed some things and bought some things and commissioned some things, and we eventually filled those spaces. And I think it's good. There's a good diversity of work that's there. Not everybody likes everything, and not everybody should, like everything or like the same things. But I think people find things that resonate with them in individual works, and for different reasons. And I think that diversity of it is really important. I'm really proud of what we were able to do, especially in that downtown area, all the way from the epic sculpture of Mark Moulton on First and Franklin down through Gateway Park and up the street. I think that contributes a lot to that area.
Yeah, it sure does, and it's just made the area, like you say. It gave it a presence along with the wonderful piece of sculpture.
Right, and the permanence of those pieces too. Businesses kind of open and close and change and reopen but the artwork stays.
Good point.
And that's also important.
Yeah.
So,
It
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. That's
Sure.
a really good overview of where we've been and
Well, thank you.
and why it's there.
Yeah.
So, Dan, how about the design of a piece and how it fits into a space when, as a sculptor, as a sculptor, and sometimes as a sculpture too,
Sometimes.
But as a sculptor, how do you, when you're commissioned to do a piece, how do you look at the space that it needs to go in?
Well, you consider the context and you consider the audience and what's going to be happening in the space. So, for instance, I'll use our downtown pieces downtown. Downtown's designed for people to be walking around, a lot of pedestrian traffic. So, a lot of the scales of the sculptures are, within human scale. I mean, slightly taller, maybe. I think the tallest one is maybe 10 or 12 feet down there. But they're designed for people to kind of walk up and sort of be in that scale with them. So, I mean, it's not so overwhelming, because if they were, say, a 40-foot tall sculpture downtown, they would be taller than some of the buildings. So you consider the size of the thing, and then you consider how people are going to interact with it. So if it's a broader space, a bigger, say, open courtyard or open field or maybe a streetscape, generally there's not a lot of people walking right up next to an artwork. So it could be drive-by traffic, it could be people riding their bikes, so you don't have to consider as much fine detail per se, but you also have to consider the scale. So one of the things as a sculptor you find is, like, you might be making something usually inside your studio, which could be, I think like Tom's, your studio has 30-foot tall ceilings or so, and so I wish. But even in there, it seems big because you're inside. As soon as you get it out into the world, and especially in Iowa because the horizon's relatively flat, I mean, the thing immediately shrinks. So you consider the architecture around the thing, the context, like if it's a pedestrian area, like there's a lot of foot traffic, or if there's, in the case of like interior works, it changes it entirely. So, but as an artist, and even being on the art committee, so I see it on both sides, the art committee has to kind of do the initial site research. So finding the sites, like with the public art committee, we went around town and identified different sites, which ones we thought might be a priority based on the city's future plans, future developments, and also just how it was going to become a part of the city's culture and where it's going. So this recently we've been working on trying to identify the entry points to the city, so as with a rose compass, north, south, east, west, and how people are going to get their first impression of Cedar Falls or know they're entering into Cedar Falls, and what they're in store for. So as opposed to just having a sign that says welcome to Cedar Falls, there's another sort of cultural marker that'll let them know. So
Let's hear from
Yeah,
Very,
no,
very good.
No, it's fine.
Very, very good. Let's hear from Martin. And, you know, what is public art? Why do we have public art?
Well, public art can help define a community. There are many communities that have no public art. I was, as I said, have said to people ever since I came to Cedar Falls that the thing that impressed me first was the public art around town. You see a community with public art and you know that they care about quality of life. I think it's something that attracts individuals, it attracts businesses. It's good for artists too. It provides an outlet, it provides income for artists. So I've been very supportive of public art and was happy to see that the city of Cedar Falls had a wonderful collection.
So coming into Cedar Falls as a new employee after the retirement of Mary Huber, who was longtime Hearst Center director, coming into this new city and even interviewing, your first impressions were?
Yes, I got a tour of all the public art in Cedar Falls before I went for my interview. And actually when I came here I was ambivalent. I loved where I was, but I thought this sounded like an excellent opportunity. And by the time I had the tour and saw the Hearst Center and the sculpture garden, I was pretty much sold. We've got, I think, 5 pieces in the sculpture garden, permanently in the sculpture garden. We've got the whisk in front of the Hearst Center, which is a sort of a landmark. It helps us stand out from the rest of Searly Boulevard. There are pieces in parks, pieces downtown. I think this piece, this new piece that we're talking about is going to be something that will draw people into the city. It's important for tourism as well as for bringing in business.
And that's really all the things that we looked at when we started the Public Art Committee was having the community embrace what we did. Our first pieces were up at the university.
Right.
You
One
wanna
of the things
talk
I
about
think that's kind of interesting about the makeup of the Public Art Committee, which you and I both know has evolved over time with different people serving on that committee, but a lot of people had no art background.
Right.
And so that process alone, so it became a really good kind of cross-section of the community that came together and shared their various sensibilities. Some of them may be more refined in thinking about art and others not so much, but all of that kind of came into the mix to determine the art in a very democratic way that we would place in Cedar Falls. And I think it fairly represents those things. Everybody on the committee doesn't always agree with everything that we end up with, or everybody in the community doesn't like everything we end up with. Collectively, I think the community values it greatly, you know. So, and I think that's what we're charged with doing.
Yeah.
You know,
You're right, and people kind of get used to it. If you're new to the community, you see this piece of art and you think, whoa, people that have been here and seen it before, or seen it before there was a piece there, and then after there was a piece, it just becomes a part of the landscape.
It does become a part of the landscape, and they embrace that, you know, in ways that I think a lot of times people don't even really acknowledge, you know, that this is that thing until you try to take it away.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right. That's right.
You know, and so, you know, we have some really excellent and very diverse things out there, and I think I doubt there's anybody in Cedar Falls that doesn't have one image of something in their head, you know, that for them represents an aspect of the community that they value, you know, and
I think that's completely true.
yeah.
Well, thanks much, you guys. Some of you will be back for the second part, and we're going to take a short break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk about our newest project.
There are moments in life we wish we could freeze in time. We live them. We live for them. They are intimately personal. They are gladly shared. What is life if we cannot experience these moments of joy, wonder, and happiness? We want people to experience more of life's precious moments. To do that, we must be healthy in heart and mind. For the heart is where life's moments are felt most, and the mind is where these moments become memories and are relived again and again. It's why we've made better heart and brain health our mission, and together, we've made an extraordinary impact. Healthier adults, more active children, stronger survivors. But we are just beginning. Until there's a world free of heart disease and stroke, we'll be there, making a healthier, longer life possible for everyone. You may ask, why do we do what we do? The answer is simple. Because we are the American Heart Association and the American Stroke Association. And life is why.
Thanks for coming back to us. We today are talking about public art in Cedar Falls. We are the Public Art Committee, along with a few other members of the Public Art Committee, and we are out of the Hearst Center for the Arts. And we were, as the first segment talked about, we have been in existence since about 2000, and since then we have done a lot to change the landscape of downtown and the Cedar Falls in the area, including the sculpture garden at the Hearst Center. So we have a new project, Christina, and you volunteered to be chair. Must have been an off day, right?
Absolutely.
But it's an exciting, wonderful project, and we appreciate you chairing this and heading this project up. So tell us about our newest project that we're going to do in Cedar Falls.
Sure. Our newest project is on Ridgeway Avenue. It's in the entrance into the industrial park. It's right on top of the hill. The city actually came to us in 2012 in the fall and talked about wanting to do a Ridgeway beautification project, and that's how the project really started. The Public Art Committee, with Dan as the chair at the time, took on a call to artists. They got over 300 responses back. They kind of narrowed it down to 11 people. They put out, had those 11 artists send in an official proposal. The committee reviewed those. We narrowed it down to 3 artists who ended up coming to the community. They took a tour of the community. They saw the actual project placement, and then were able to tell us about their idea for what that sculpture would be. So we had 3 of those artists come to town, and then ultimately we just took a vote and unanimously selected an artist that we're all very excited about. So that's the project. It's on Ridgeway Avenue. You can see it from Highway 20. Dan previously talked about how, as a committee, you were trying to get away from just downtown. You wanted to spread your wings to other places in the community, doing entrances, and that's definitely an area of town that is expanding. We like the idea of going to the industrial park to add, another group of businesses into the mix, and so that's our goal with this project.
Great. Can you tell us about our sculptor, a little bit about our sculptor?
Sure. So our sculptor is Richard Hunt. He's from the south side of Chicago. He's very well known, has the most public art pieces in the country. While maybe our audience hasn't heard of them, artists know him. There will be people who come to this community just to see the sculpture. Unlike the downtown pieces, as Dan said, this is a much taller sculpture. It's not meant to be seen from standing right next to it. It's meant to be seen from the community, from Highway 20, from the industrial park. As you're driving on Ridgeway Avenue, you'll see it at the top of the hill. That's the point of it. It's not something you're gonna stand next to and touch. It's meant to see afar. So Richard Hunt has done projects like this. We feel very confident in him, and we're very excited to have him in this community.
Yeah. And Tom, I think you know Mr. Hunt.
I do.
Would you like to?
Sure. The committee had decided to try, and I think I very much agree with the philosophy that our collection so far is not that, and we've already talked about this, sort of the diversity of it, but it's fairly provincial. That there are regional artists and so forth, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, as an artist also, and thinking as a member of a public art committee, how do you engage the national cultural dialogue about something, about what you're doing with your artwork and the kinds of artwork you have? So it's this ongoing dialogue that's happening that we could participate in more. So I think to reach out to an artist who has a national or international stature is a vehicle to do that. In the same way that the business community, we could be building and creating businesses that only deal with each other in the industrial park or something. But of course, as we all know the conversation, we all want to think globally, we want to think nationally at very least, right? So in terms of the Public Art Committee, how can we reach out? How can we engage this larger national or international dialogue that's going on in the arts? So Richard Hunt is clearly proven as a player in that kind of thing. And so how does that, in the end, then elevate our dialogue and also just elevate the sort of prestige of the collection? Dan had a good analogy for it, I think, in a presentation we had made about this some time ago, where he talked, well, if Tom Hanks came and participated in a play at the Oster-Region Theater, how would that elevate the theater? Suddenly it's Broadway, right?
Right, exactly.
So there's this, that's really kind of perfect.
Yeah.
So in a similar way, that's what this does. It doesn't diminish anything else. In fact, it elevates the entire collection.
Absolutely.
I have a sculpture in our collection, and I'm happy to think that I'll be in a collection with Richard Hunt. So that's suddenly my.
It's a real plus.
Yeah, it's a
right?
real plus. My value just went up.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
So I think that's all good, and and his work's wonderful, and it's a perfect match of things. I mean, his work. He talks about. As if nature was a sculptor, what kinds of forms would it create? And something that I'm paraphrasing him badly, but that's the intent. But then there's also this kind of architectural elements to his work. And so if you think about the industrial park, just as a physical thing, it has nature, it has the lakes and landscaping and prairie and so forth. And at the same time, it has this architecture and this business and it's this machine. And Richard Hunt's kind of work it's not about that, but it's like that. It's similar to that kind of thing. And in that way, it's very appropriate, I think, for it. So I think just the selection of a highly acclaimed artist, and then that particular works, his particular work, I think is just it's the perfect match for our city.
Yeah, and when we looked at 386 artists, sculptors wanted to come to Cedar Falls and put a piece of art in that place. And so Dan, tell us about that place. Tell us what it takes to put a sculpture in a space, and that particular space.
Well, this particular project, it's a challenge, but it's also a pretty big collaboration, not only between the artists and the Public Art Committee, but with the community and contractors and things like that, and city planning. So as with any large-scale project like this, there's usually a master plan, a long-range vision of what this place is going to look like, and that involves landscaping, maybe, or streetscaping, I knew is the popular term. Siting the sculpture, where's it going to sit? Safety is always an issue, and how it's going to interact with the community. Maintenance. So as far as from an artist perspective, it's really like being a contractor. So you have to work with engineers, you have to work with the city planners, you have to work with the landscape architect to make sure everything not only looks good, but it's going to last for decades. And so as an artist, you're tasked with this idea of you've got a budget, you have to be able to buy materials, you have to cover your studio overhead, you have to pay any employees you might have, you have to have insurance, you have to get it here, you have to install it. So I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this. It's not just simply, picking something up and plopping it down. So
You don't just dig a hole and put it in,
no,
and that's
it's in some of this stuff. The bigger the sculpture, the more elaborate the engineering challenge. And so with this site, it's my understanding is the city's planning is like a major corridor. So getting it all to tie together as part of this sort of entrance into the industrial park, entrance into Cedar Falls, and it's in the early stages right now. So as with sometimes people can be a little short-sighted and not see it. They only see what it is currently. They can't see what it could be, and that's one of the things the Public Art Committee and artists are always sort of trying to do is look a little further down the road. What could this be? What's going to happen with this? So.
Great. All really good points. When you see a piece of art, whether it's downtown, whether it's in a sculpture garden, whether it's alongside of a river, any of that, there was actually a plan that went with that. It just didn't, as we just said, just plunk it down and walk away. There's maintenance, there's upkeep to it, there's making sure that if there is landscape around it, that it's being taken care of to show off the piece of the artist that you really prize, that they would have a piece with us. So, Christina, tell us how much we are going to pay for this piece, how we're going to get that money, and how wonderful it's going to be to raise that money from our community.
Sure. So to pay for this piece, we're going to use a portion of our Public Art Committee money. We get a portion of the hotel motel tax. We're also using TIF money for the infrastructure, for the structural support, for the lighting, and for the landscaping. We also have a few grant opportunities, and then we're looking for the community to help donate to this project. So we're kind of knee-deep into a campaign, if you will, for the project. We're raising funds via the Cedar Falls Community Foundation. We're part of it's under the Public Art Fund. You'll find that on their website and in their materials. We've sent packets to the community. We've had a couple of informal breakfasts trying to engage the businesses at Industrial Park. So ultimately, to get this project done, we're going to need help from the community to help do it. Clearly, we've had support in the past from the community, so we're just looking for this to be the next project. And once we get this one done, we'll move on to the next one. It's not the end-all, be-all. This is just the current project that we're working on. It is the biggest project we've ever worked on, so it seems a little bit overwhelming, but it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, it is. And having it set there on the hill, and so that everyone can see it as they're coming in or passing by Cedar Falls, it will eventually become a very prominent landmark for Cedar Falls. And the fact that we have really worked on this project for over 4 years to make it happen. And with Mr. Hunt as the renowned international known artist, we've committed that period of time and have been very comfortable doing that because we know that the end product is going to be extremely well received and well liked in the community. Well, we can hope that people are getting as excited as we are, and we know they will be because of the scale and the fact that Mr. Hunt is coming to Cedar Falls. And so we encourage people to donate to this. And again, tell us again about how to donate.
You can donate via the Cedar Falls Community Foundation. There's a website. They have a website, there's a tab under how to give. You can donate via PayPal. You just pull down to the Public Art Fund. You could also mail in donations to both the Community Foundation. There's a P.O. box that you can send them to, and you can also call Martin over at the Hearst Center and he'll help you donate to it as well.
Great.
Tax deductible, right?
And it's tax deductible,
yes.
yeah. So the
Yes.
bigger the donation, the more
Yes,
tax deduction
yes,
you can
and
take.
you can extend it over 3 years, your donation,
So
if
we
you would
can
like.
pledge to it.
Yes.
Thank you much, you guys. This has been a great morning, afternoon, evening, whenever we're going to be shown, and we will be shown all those periods of time. Thank you very much. The Cedar Falls Public Art Committee is alive and well in Cedar Falls, and will even be bigger and better once we get our new project done and the other projects that we have on our list, because we have a number of them. So be looking for us around the community. Thanks for being with us today.